Let's learn something really quick.
If you got the time, absolutely. And you got the discipline, there's no question about it.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great practice to put into your everyday life, you guys.
You generally regret the things you don't do, not the things you did do. Let me say it that way.
Mic drop. This was just awesome. I love meeting my guests in person, and it's a whole nother animal, and the energy is just electric. You guys, this is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. What is good, everyone? This is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcast. To live your best life, you must live label free. As always, bringing incredible guests from all over the world, so sit back, relax, and tune in. My next guest is a Chief People Officer at NORC, University of Chicago, and she's also an author. Please welcome Dr. Tenia Davis.
Hi.
Do you want me to say Dr. Tenia or just Tenia?
Tenia's fine.
Okay, Tenia, I loved our intro call talking about how you are a people-centric leader. And you've released one book, you got another one on the way, and it's several of the series, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that in today's world, being a people-centric leader is super important. But I want to know why it's something that you are focused on in your career.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest gaps that I see in organizations. And I think we drive profit extremely well, and you need people to drive profit. And a work culture with so many different backgrounds, perspectives, different generations. We all approach work differently, and we all have different needs. And in order to kind of have a holistic view and approach to how we drive performance, it's all about the people. All the studies, they all lean towards the same ending, and that is you take care of your people take care of the company. And it's a simple formula. And I think as leaders, we have that obligation to do that. Right? Set the tone where people can be successful. And if people are successful, they stay and they thrive. Someone else questioned, do you really believe people show up and do their best? And I do. I think sometimes the conditions and the atmosphere and the different complexities kind of factor into how a person does their best. And, I think as leaders, we are kind of held to a different standard to lead and contribute and add to cultures in a positive way.
Do you feel that it's hard to kind of turn the needle with leadership when it comes to taking a different approach to be more people-centric? Because I think that leaders tend to get in like this tunnel vision where they aren't as concerned about making sure their employees are happy.
I do. I think it's even more complex now. I think the world is just polarized, right? And so because of that, there is, how do I say this or to that person, or, I'm afraid I might cross the line. And so it really kind of interferes with people feeling they can authentically connect. So, that's kind of one layer of it. Some of it is skill. Some of it is, some people just want to come to work, and go home. And so I just think that it's just layers to it. Do I think, leaders walk in the door saying, I don't want to do this? No, but I do think we're in a time where folks have technically thrived and done extremely well. And so they've been promoted. And there are aspects of leadership that, we just don't teach along with the technical side of it, right? And then leading teams is very complex. And, in some situations are very draining. And you're taking in a lot of different backgrounds and perspectives. And what happens is, you have this very diverse group of folks that come into the workplace, and all of the stuff that comes with them is not checked at the door. It goes into the office. Yeah. And so it's, how do I listen? How do I engage this group? How do I understand the dynamics of the team? And so it somewhat forces leaders to lean in just a little bit differently and really understanding the team that they're leading, setting the tone, communicating, making sure, they understand what the expectations are, and then, providing feedback for development. It's just more layered now. And what I hear from leaders is, it's draining. I just want to just do the job because the people side of it is so complex now. And, they're wanting, how do I say this to this person? I don't want to offend anyone. Or, how do I engage this person? They don't really talk up in the meetings. And so it's just, those are different skills that go along with connecting with staff members.
Yeah. Now, so in your role where you're at, do you work with the leaders and how to try to apply this people-centric mentality in their leadership skills?
Yes, yes, and it's a great group, right? And at least what I've experienced is that people really want to, and a lot of the folks here have worked together for quite some time, and so they've developed kind of their friendships, their communities, and so on. And so it's more so how do we help others kind of integrate in? But it's so nice to see that there is that interest and care for folks, and also just in how people are developing and making sure that there is a sense of belonging and inclusion.
Is it difficult when you have such a diverse group of people to make sure that everybody's feeling included and heard? Because I feel like you said, there's many different backgrounds, personalities, emotional things, everybody's got their own stuff. And so how do you communicate to the whole when when we're all so different?
Yeah. And where I've seen it work really well is when organizations articulate, what is our purpose, right? What is the purpose of the organization? What is the DNA of the business? What are the values, right? When the foundation is set, and then for the teams that are being led, where those leaders take the time to really know their team, right? And so when you really know your team and you take the time to really understand what makes them tick, or what are their drivers, or what are their aspirations, and you engage with them from that understanding, they tend to engage with you from a different understanding, right? And so it is somewhat of a different pace, and it's not the same rhythm, as 10 years ago. That just doesn't work, that style of leadership. However, what I've seen work, and what I've heard from staff members is that, one, my manager hears me, my manager sees me, my manager includes me in conversations. I feel valued, I feel respected, I feel that I'm part of something. So I hear those phrases attached to, wow, this is a good experience in a people-centric environment where I can thrive. That's where I've heard, success come out of that.
That is an incredible thing that's incredible feedback to get. So now, my background, I'm a former C-level executive, and so I was a leader across many different teams. And, I personally love to empower my team. I'm a little bit more in your face if there's an issue, but I love to ask them, what tools do you need from me to help you succeed, right? And so now fast forward, after I had to start my life over, some of my background, which most of you people know, I had to get into the corporate world, starting kind of at the bottom. And I can tell you that I've had very few good leaders in that time where I was back in corporate. I had one leader that I felt was just so incredible. He empowered me to do my job. I felt heard. He'd listen to me. And because of that, I succeeded in that role. I was hitting 200+% to goal because I got his support. But the leader before him was very condescending, didn't hear me. I felt like was a little bit on a power trip. I was not happy with that leader, and so I've experienced a lot of different leaders because had to go back into the corporate world. And it's very interesting how ill-equipped they are to deal with different personalities on their team.
Yeah. And that part is hard, right? Because the impact of that is, for some employees, it could be turnover. Yeah. It could be, a bad experience that is traumatizing for some people. So it's just many things. And you're right. Some leaders are not. I always say all leaders are not equal. The worst thing you want to do is micromanage, or so far outside of your chops of leading, to learn along the way at the expense of others is sometimes not the best strategy.
Yeah, no, definitely not. And yeah, I left a couple places because of those leaders. I was I'm not going to tolerate this. I don't deserve to be treated this way. And that was the extreme. People that they were being very, I think that person had to step down because of the experience that a lot of people had. So let's talk about a couple of your books. So you wrote your first book was a servant leadership model. Tell us a little bit about that and what.
Yeah. That means. Well, actually, I just poured my heart and soul into that. So that was right after I completed defended my dissertation, and I took kind of a lot of what my research was around. But the title of the book is 8 Essential steps to inspire others and build a thriving workplace.
Mm.
It's workforce, I'm sorry. It's a servant leadership advantage. And it's all about, leading from a servant leadership model. And during my research, I found that organizations that were able to really thrive and have a people-centric, truly a people-centric environment, those that had the leadership style of what is described as a servant leader or service leader tend to build a healthier work environment for employees to thrive. And I was also curious and intrigued that in all those situations where those individuals moved on to other organizations, the behaviors that they learned around servant leadership, they were able to carry them on to other organizations. And I thought, wow, how powerful is that? That's learning really in the best state of forming good leaders, right? And so when I first started my research, I wasn't sure how behaviors like that transfer, because sometimes a person can go into a toxic environment and consume all of that around them. And maybe some things they've learned before, they don't use it, but that wasn't the case. In the study that I conducted, I found that individuals that were within environments where they learned about servant leadership, they were able to carry that on and create other positive environments. And so I tried to capture all of that in a book and create different stories that, I've experienced and other HR practitioners experience, so that others can kind of learn from it in a short way.
Sure.
And then use the model to kind of start building their muscle, their leadership muscle, right? So I wanted to contribute something in that space that was positive. My new book, Constructive Insights, The Blueprint for Feedback, this really just came out of, this is the number one thing that leaders hate.
Yeah.
They hate giving reviews and they do not like giving feedback for all the right reasons.
Sure.
And especially now, as we talked earlier, in a polarized environment. And so I literally just took a lot of stories and examples that I've kind of walked leaders through, and I created a very simple step, like where someone literally could say, I don't know how to get feedback on XYZ. And I kind of gave scripts and things like that. And this is how you can approach it. Words mean everything. And everybody hears things differently. So I can start off with, that project did not go well. And someone like, oh my God, you said I failed. And so, how do you create the moment for people to hear, and how do you create the moment to deliver a message, especially if it's constructive? And I like the word constructive insights, because I think really when you're giving feedback, it shouldn't be once a year or twice a year. It should be an ongoing conversation where you're providing observations and then also solutions of how a person can improve, right? And so typically I would say, start with something positive. Everybody is doing something positive. Start with something positive and, hey, I want to recognize you did XYZ well, and this was the outcome of it. However, for the next project, let's look at XYZ. And maybe if we structure it this way, we can also carry on. And so it just helps people to see the bigger picture versus a slither, right? And it also signals to that employee, wow, okay, they care. They took enough time to recognize I am doing something well. They also took the time to help me think through how I can improve in this area versus just, I call it just throwing up feedback. Right? You didn't do this, you didn't do that. And oh my gosh, I'm gonna move you to a new role, or I'm gonna move you to I knew one leader, he would just move people around when he didn't like what they were, how they were, and they didn't learn anything. Right. There was one staff person that moved to like 4 departments. And then the leader said, I don't think they're going to be successful. Well, how can they be? I mean, it's impossible. They didn't learn. Right. And we didn't create the opportunity for them to learn. So, I do think that there is a more positive exchange that we can create for employees to learn and to grow. The workplace today, a lot of people, they kind of figured out their groove. And so they find their tribe, they stay, they're not trying to move to other companies. Recruiting will become harder. So how do you cultivate the talent you have? And, how do you create an environment where people want to stay and grow?
Yeah, for sure. A couple of questions. What does servant leadership mean? If someone's like listening and maybe they're a leader and they've heard this terminology and they really don't know how they can become that type of leader, what does that mean for you and what you talk about in your book?
Yeah, so I know a lot of folks prefer the term service leader, and so I use service leader as well as servant leader, but I've seen the best definitions of that is when a leader really takes the time to understand and know their team,
Yeah.
where their mission is not about their scale in the organization, but it's about the scale of their team. And I use a term, it's a mouthful, but cultural perspicacity, and it's all about really authentically taking the time to get to know your team, the nuances of your team. And when you do that, they're able to thrive. So someone that exhibits those characteristics is someone that can have empathy. And you can have empathy. Empathy is not a soft skill. And I want to make sure I say that. A lot of times people think empathy like, oh my gosh, that's just, I don't want to do that. It's not a softness, but having empathy and someone that also creates an environment where people can thrive and have awareness, right? And where I've seen service leaders really be successful is where they have self-awareness. It's not a one-way street,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I think that that's moving forward, especially in today's world, being a servant leader is real service leader, whatever you want to call it, is
Right.
definitely really the only kind of leader that you really should be. I mean, I don't think that there's a lot of tolerance for anything less than that, but I could be wrong. I'm not in the corporate world anymore, but that's just from my own personal experience and how I feel like our society is today. And in regards to what you said about the blueprint for giving feedback, I think when you lead with complimenting somebody on the job that they're doing allows them to be more open to the constructive criticism that you're going to give them to be better at something else. And so,
Right.
I remember one person, like with the one leader that I didn't like, that was just like, bad Deanna, bad Deanna, bad Deanna. I was just like, I had immediately, my wall went up, had a major attitude, like, I know I'm doing things right, but you just want to point out all the things that I'm doing wrong. Lead with complimenting them on their strengths, and then try to give them pointers on how they can improve their weaknesses. And I think, we should do that in any relationship, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's personal, business, whatever. It's like you have a spouse or a partner, like you want to lead with because that's going to create this.
Right. Exactly. But it does. And it does. And so, when you're in a work environment, it's even more heightened, right? Because they're not your family members, right? And so everyone's kind of defending their space per se. And so you do want to create that openness where there's a dialogue. It's more of a conversation.
Yeah.
Because there might be something that the leader is not aware of. Life is happening for a lot of folks. And so it could be someone is experiencing life and no one was aware of it. And so at least allows the opportunity to have those insights.
Yeah, agreed. How do you feel that when we heard during COVID, the Great Resignation, or what was it? The Great
Resignation?
Yeah. So how do you feel that has changed the way leaders should move forward and how they are approaching their teams because of what we just went through with the pandemic?
I think it's caused many complexities for organizations, right? I do think the biggest flights is where organizations really didn't care and hold their leaders accountable, where organizations started to have resignations and they didn't have that awareness and then started to pay attention to it and solicit feedback from the organization and look at how they could, make changes. Then, I saw, of course, the positive side of that. I think the COVID gave people pause. And I think it really allowed people to reassess what's important to me, right? And so for those that were in a dogmatic environment, they just checked out. And, that's that old saying, people don't leave a company, they leave their managers. That's true. Where I saw organizations really pay attention to how their leaders were impacting and influencing the organization, that's where I saw employees start to shift their engagement. And organizations that said, I don't care, people are a dime a dozen, I think some of them are still honestly, recovering because, social media stuff, whether it's fact, fiction, it flies fast. And so organizations that paid attention to that, I think had better traction to recover. Because I think when it happened, I think the first flight, companies were like, oh, well, maybe that's just, people reacting And then as it continued, I think organizations start to pay attention. And those that really paid attention and look and really analyzed why is this happening, I think are reaping the benefits of that by the stability of their organizations. Is it across the board? No. But I do think that moment in time showed organizations that people no longer are going to show up 9 to 5 just to take anything.
Yeah, I think it was definitely like where leaders and companies had to kind of take inventory of how they were going to move forward through these changing times, because people really looked at their lives, and if they were unhappy where they were just like, that's it, I'm out. And so I think it's important now, this day and age, especially with all these AI changes and things like, we still need people in the workforce. And if they have other options, how are you going to get people to stay? So
the gig market took off. Yeah. People realized that, well, wait a minute, I can work for 2 or 3 companies, and, I can make my own plans, and I can navigate and do well. And so I think other industries were created, other services were created, and people got really innovative.
Yeah.
I think that's exciting as well. And so I think for organizations that really want to keep a pipeline, because when you lose folks, some turnover is good, but turnover where you lose different aspects and nuances of your business, that's hard to teach. Companies have to really look at what is the right trade-off for them.
I agree. Tenia, with that being said, where can people find you, connect with you, learn more about what you do, and purchase your books?
So my books are, my first book is on Amazon. My new book will come out in October. And I am on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm also on Instagram. Okay. And on Instagram, it's under The Leadership Wise. That's the THE Leadership Wise. And Wise is WISE. It's just everything positive and, advice about careers and leadership, but it's a great way that I can contribute from a place where I have a lot of passion. Yeah.
I love it. And we can tell. You guys, I'm going to put some of her links in the show notes. So if you connect with her, go purchase her book, go follow her on social. If you have any questions, if you're a leader yourself and wanting to learn more about how to be more of a people-centric leader, service style leader, go ahead and reach out to her. I'm sure she'd love to have a conversation with you. This is the part of the show where I like to ask for last words of wisdom or advice. What would you like to leave with us today?
I think the world is upside down right now. And so, my challenge to your listeners is, what can we do to create a better state for everyone? How can we extend kindness to someone else? Whether you're working with someone, maybe they might need a little mentorship, or maybe they might need help understanding the landscape of the organization. Or if you're at Starbucks, you pay back, you pay it back. And I just think that if we just start with one thing and see what kind of trickle effect that will have, I want to leave a better state for my kids, right? And so what can we do to create that? A moment in time showed us the underbelly of the country. I truly believe we're a lot better than where we are. And how can we move that sort of positivity forward around kindness, understanding, empathy, inclusion? How can we do that?
Yeah. Beautiful. I love those last words of wisdom. That was just, I agree wholeheartedly. Dr. Tenia, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and talking about something that I think that is very important to talk about. And I see a rise in coaches for leaders, which I think is where this really is important for them to be coached on how to become a service style leadership, be more people-centric, how we can engage in a world where we are so disconnected and unengaged because we're so distracted by everything going on around us. So I think it's a very important conversation, and thank you very much for sharing your expertise. You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
You guys, this is your host, Deanna Radulescu with Label Free Podcasts. Live your best life. You must live label free. As always, don't forget to subscribe, follow, rate, review, comment, share, all those good things. And I'll be back soon with more dynamic guests.